Welcome to the Idea Climbing Podcast. If you practice servant leadership, people want to get to know you through your origin story. Sharing it will also boost your brand. I discuss how to create and live your origin story in this episode with my guest, Adrienne Wilkerson. Adrienne is the co-founder and CEO of Beacon Media and Marketing, an award-winning digital marketing agency renowned for its impactful work in the mental and behavioral health sectors. A visionary leader and sought-after speaker, Adrienne is also a published author and podcast host who shares insights on leadership, ethical marketing, and the transformative role of AI in business. When she's not leading her team to success, Adrienne finds inspiration on her family's ranch, where her commitment to hard work and resilience fuels her mission to create a lasting legacy of positive impact. We dive into topics including the structure of a great origin story, why it's important to include what you learned from your challenges you overcame, the responsibilities of a servant leader, and the one thing above all else that you need to do to create and live your servant leadership origin story, and more golden nuggets of advice. You're going to love this show. Thank you for making time to be on the Idea Climbing Podcast, Adrienne. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
And we're going to talk about servant leadership, and we're going to get started and also talk about how it combines with creating your origin story, which I love, and we haven't talked about it on the podcast before. When it comes to creating your origin story, and then get in a little bit about servant leadership, before we get into tips, the tactics, the strategies, why are those important to you? What's your story with an origin story and servant leadership?
Yeah. One of my favorite things when I get to talk to founders, CEOs, business owners, there's almost always a powerful story behind why they're doing what they're doing. Why did they start their own business? Why does this matter? And so that story has really created them as leaders and created them in the business space. And so I think that's why that origin story is so important. It's a powerful connection piece. And so as we're talking servant leadership and talking, business, like part of my origin story is my father is an entrepreneur and a business owner. So was my grandmother. I have a lot of entrepreneurs in my family. And so I had a lot of really cool examples in my life. My grandmother, together with a partner, started the very first art gallery in Anchorage, Alaska, way back in the day. And so she was an entrepreneurial person. My father started one of the first counseling and medical clinic combinations with the idea of taking care of the whole person, and the medical and the counseling working together. And it was a beautiful vision, and there was a reason behind that. And so that origin story and like what both of them spoke into my life as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a leader. My father, like I said, is a therapist, started his own therapy clinic. So I was raised by a therapist. So there was a lot of times where it was even like, okay, Dad, I need you to be my dad and not my therapist right now. And he'd be like, okay, right. Thank you. And we'd laugh and switch gears. But his insight into people and his understanding of what drives people and how people work and tick and interact with each other, that experience and that knowledge that he had through school, through working with a lot of leaders, because he's specialized in working with leadership in nonprofits and for-profits and even the faith-based community. He passed a lot of that on to me just organically. He was a natural teacher. And so even in the circumstances that I would grow up in, dealing with personal conflict at school, at college, and just even in relationships, he would just walk me through a lot. Well, you've got to ask these questions and you got to understand there's this going on. And if you're going to lead, there's a guiding relationship there. And I remember coming back from high school one day from class and so frustrated because I was yearbook editor-in-chief and we were just coming off a big deadline, and I was like venting that my team didn't do this, and I had to take over for that person, and I had to do this person's job and that person's job, and why can't they just do their job, right? And my dad's like, okay, so congratulations, you met your deadline. I'm like, yeah, we did it. I did it, was really what I was saying. And he's like, okay, you got to cross the finish line. how much of your team came across the finish line with you? Or did you just plow through and make it happen and leave the rest of them in the dust?
Mm.
And that was one of those moments. That's one of the lessons that hit me upside the head and really shifted the course of how I viewed leadership. I'm going to get really emotional here, but where it was like, okay, it's not just enough as a leader to accomplish a goal if you don't bring your team with you. Now, granted, not everybody will choose to walk across that finish line with you. But if they don't choose to, that's their choice. So long as you as a leader are doing everything that you can to create that kind of environment where people want to grow with you, want to accomplish the goal with you. And it's not really leading if you do everybody's job and cross that finish line by yourself. It was a great hike.
Yep.
But that's not leading. And so there's things like that, like stories like that my father wove in, those lessons that he wove into my life that have really shaped how I choose to lead now. And I definitely don't nail it on the head every time.
Of course.
But that's part of the process of learning and growing. And so as a business owner, as a CEO, those stories that really make up your origin story, those are powerful because those are what connect with people. And people want to buy. They hate to be sold, but they love to buy, right? We know this concept in business. And who do they want to buy from? They want to buy from somebody they know, like, and trust. So in this digital age, how do we as business owners, as CEOs, how do we connect with our audience, with our ideal client profile? We do it in part through our origin story, through those stories that shaped us and shaped our company, because those connect with people. That story could connect with somebody else who had a therapist as a father. There's lots of aspects of that, but that's why the origin story, and even some of the really raw parts of your origin story, your failures, your successes, that's what makes you human. And that's what provides the opportunity for people to connect and to feel like they know you, which means they're going to trust you. Or maybe they find out they're like, yeah, this is not something I connect with. I'm going to go find another company, which means that's good. They're self-selecting. They're not your ideal client if that's the case. But it does mean that you can really connect with the people who want to do business with you, which that leads to higher conversions and a longer client retention, which is what we all want, is to be able to keep that client. And that client then potentially refers others. So that's a kind of a 10,000-foot view, I think, as to why that origin story is so important.
I'd love to dive into it because I think we'll talk about servant leadership, but in context of what we talked about off camera and what we're talking about now, I personally believe, at least, if you don't have, and what you said, including raw details and origin story, that's what it's servant leadership, is getting people to follow you and eventually developing them, but getting people to follow a mission. If you don't have an origin story, I think that could be tough. Could you start with some of the structure? What makes a good origin story?
Yes, great question. So I always tell people to start with your why. Why did you get into this? Why did you start a company? What problem were you trying to solve? Because that's almost always at the core of your story. So a lot of people struggle. They're like, I don't know, I started this business 10 years ago. I don't remember why. And it's like, no, what was your why? There's got to be a why. What was that spark? What was that question, that problem that you wanted to solve? And so start there. Start with your why. And, was it you woke up in the middle of the night and were like, oh my gosh, I could do this. I could do this product better. That's a good story too. Or maybe it was a family member that struggled with, we hear with this a lot as we're working in the mental health field. A lot of therapists get into it because they had a spouse or a sibling or a close friend who couldn't get the help they needed when they needed it. And those are the connection pieces. And again, like you said, it's important to include even the challenges and the failures because we are all human. None of us end up knocking it out of the park. So what were some of the earlier failures that led you to improve? Like that's another component of your origin story. So your why, your early failures, maybe even some of your recent failures. And what did you learn from those challenges that you overcame. That's another key component of your origin story. And even just talking about, there's typically milestones in your business that are really important. Those are good things to include in your origin story. Often those tie into the challenges that you overcame.
Mhm.
So those often can be very synonymous, but pick out 2 or 3 big milestones, and whether those are the challenges or the challenges led to those milestones, those are really good concrete things to include in your origin story. And then wrap your origin story up with that. Where are you going next? What's in the future for you? What is that vision that you now want other people to catch and to want to follow you into and help you manifest that vision for you and your company?
Well, once you really understand that, let's bridge a gap here. Once you know your origin story and you're ready to share it, how does your origin story shape your servant leadership journey? Because I'd imagine it has a big effect on you as a leader, especially in servant leadership.
I hope so. It should.
Yeah.
And I think those challenges that you faced and overcame are big parts of shaping that servant leadership perspective because, like we've said a couple of times now, we all have failures. And honestly, if we're not failing, it means we're not trying new things enough. We're not trying to innovate. We're playing it safe, which in today's business world is not really an option. So I think looking at those failures and going, okay, what part did I play in that? What part do I need to own? What part do I need to take and learn from? That is a different leadership mindset that leads you into servant leadership than maybe stepping out of it and just going, well, yeah, that sucked. And so that was so and so's fault, or that was, outside of our control, but blah, blah, blah. So, really internalizing, what did I learn from that? How did I improve as a person? Because those are then stories you can share with your team as you're coaching them and helping them grow and learn. You can go, yeah, I kind of ran into something similar. This is what happened. This is a mistake I made. And this is what I learned from it. That brings you into a place of humility in leadership, as opposed to kind of that top down leadership that is completely opposite from servant leadership.
Well, when you're talking about failures, trials, and tribulations, and sharing your origin story, how much should you share? And is there a such thing as oversharing too many trials and tribulations, or too personal of a story? Or is it lean a little bit more towards being an open book? Where does it lie with sharing and oversharing?
I think that's a little bit of a personal preference piece. Some people are very private people, so they may want to share stuff more in theory than details. Um, I would say for me personally, I draw the line when the story includes other people and maybe their failures or their triumphs. So sometimes, like, I pull my son and my husband into a lot of stories. So my son's 18 now, so I have to be more careful.
Yeah.
So I have to check with him sometimes if I want to tell this story, because it's going to affect him differently now than when he was 4. When he was 4, he didn't care, but now he does. So if I'm putting it out in the public and part of my story includes something with somebody else, I need to be very sensitive of that. I need to check with them and that kind of thing. I do think there is a line. I do think there is a place where you can overshare. And that really gets into that personal side of things. So maybe sometimes in those cases, you can share more of a broader, in theory sort of thing instead of getting into the details. A lot of times we've got some of the owners that have gotten into mental health because of an extremely traumatic situation that happened to them, or a sibling. It could involve rape or assault or, something that's very, very personal. So those kind of things don't go into detail.
Yeah.
Keep it broad. There was an assault or there was a very serious situation that, involved da 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 da. So there's ways to still talk about that stuff without getting into the nitty gritty or exposing somebody else. So if that is a core part of your origin story, I generally say just keep it a little bit more broad. Be careful with financials. That's another area you can overshare very quickly. So, we had a part in our history with Beacon where we were facing bankruptcy. It was really bad. I mean, we were literally having meetings with the ownership team. Do we close our doors tomorrow? Or do we go to every vendor and beg forgiveness and beg for them to let us do payment plans? And, those were brutal discussions. So I can share that in generalities. I don't have to share how much we were in the hole. Don't have to share whose fault it was necessarily, because we all had a part to play in it, every one of us on leadership. But things like that, like I tell people, you don't have to tell them whether it was $20 in the hole or 20,000 in the hole. Like that's not as relevant to the story as what you walked through and how you overcame it. And so like for us, we decided bankruptcy would not be respectful and fair to our employees or to the vendors that we owed a lot of money to. And so we chose not to, and we chose to talk to every vendor, which was not a short list. And were very humbling conversations, very humbling conversations. So please let us make payment plans. And honestly, most of them did. Most of them are like, I've been in that spot. It sucks, and thank you for coming and having a conversation. But I didn't know that was what was going to happen. And some of them were not very kind at all. We're not understanding. Basically, swore up a blue streak at us and sent us to collections. So we made payment arrangements with collections and they got half the money they would have gotten in the first place. But that's okay. That was their choice to make. I respect their choice. And we it took us about 2.5 years and we paid everybody off. And we got to keep 2/3 of our staff. And I'm very thankful we made those choices. But those were, that was a very painful period in our company's history. And people don't talk about things like that.
No, and you started to touch on it. Once you take on a servant leadership role, you have a following. I'd like to get your perspective on then what are the responsibilities of a servant leader? Because it's not just like, hey, I'm great, follow me, and everyone does. What are some responsibilities when you realize, wow, I'm in a leadership role now. I have to do X, Y, and Z for the people following me and looking up to me. What are some of those?
Mm-hmm. I think number one is just understanding the responsibility that you have as a leader when you do now have a following. They do look to you. They will model the behavior that they see you acting out. They won't always follow what you say, but they're always going to follow what you do. So that is a big part of the responsibility, is knowing that you can say whatever you want to say, but your actions are what really demonstrates your leadership, and they will mimic those and follow that. So making sure that the responsibility, again, making sure that your actions and your words align and that they're both moving everything in the same direction. So having alignment, understanding the responsibility that, it's a heady responsibility to know it's not just payroll, it's 30 lives. It's 30 families that I'm affecting with every decision I make. And really thinking about that and putting people over profit. You have to have some profit in a company. Otherwise, you can't continue to take care of people and serve the mission and the focus. So it's not people over profit to the detriment of the company, but it's making choices with your people in mind first and profit second. Like we choose as a company to offer a lot more robust benefits than a lot of companies our size. That cuts into our profit. We don't have the same or as good a profit margins as a lot of our colleagues, but that's okay. We're making that choice, and that's something we're choosing to invest in. So that's, understanding that investment, putting people first. And that really involves a lot of coaching too. This is the part that is my favorite, is meeting people where they're at, going, how are you doing today? How are your kids doing today? Remember their kids' names, remember their spouse's name as much as you can. Connect with them on a person to person level outside of their performance at work. Treat them as a human being, not an employee or just an employee. Yes, they're an employee, but they're also a human. They have things at work or at home that are affecting their work. So, for instance, one of the things that we do, if we have an employee that's underperforming, one of the first questions is just like, okay, how are you doing? What's going on? This is not like you. What's really going on? And they may not want to share, but if you've developed that servant leadership, that environment of trust, the popular term right now is, safe space. But it's not about necessarily, there's a very organic, natural way to create safe space without it being artificial. I think if you go out and set out to create safe space, it's going to be very contrived. Yeah. But if you're practicing servant leadership and putting people first, that safe place will naturally evolve, is my opinion. So then hopefully employees will feel more comfortable to share what's really going on, what really happened. We just recently, one of our employees had a death in the family, and she, as one of the oldest children, it's kind of an extended relative, but all the funeral arrangements fell on her. And so we start getting, she's not getting back to clients. She's not doing this kind of stuff, which we're like, okay, so what's going on? Help us help you kind of a thing. And she's like, I was trying to keep it out of work. I was really trying. Clearly I'm not. It's leaking through. This is what happened. And we're just like, oh my gosh, that's heavy. Well, no wonder you're struggling at work. So then instead of it being a disciplinary conversation, it's a support conversation. How can we help you through this situation? How can our team rally around you to support you in this? We can have some of the other, employees that are in similar positions, maybe temporarily take on some of your clients. We can rearrange a little bit to support you through this so that she doesn't feel like she's failing. She gets to be able to be there for her family. She gets to have some time. And as us as business owners, like that creates a loyalty and a depth of commitment that is unmatchable. Like you can't get that through incentive programs. You can't get that, through PTO or whatever. All those things are good. All those things help. But when you can meet an employee in that moment at a human level and go, how do we help you through this right now? Like that is life-changing for you and for your employee. And those are those moments, not that I look for tragedy or anything like that, but sometimes it's even the other side. We've had weddings here. We've had buying a first house here, which is crazy. We've had many children born in the last 13 years to employees and to owners. And it's like, how do we support you during this time of your life? And that is, I think, at the core of being a servant leadership leader and putting people over profit.
We have covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. When it comes to, I'll say, creating and living your origin story and getting into servant leadership, people listening, watching, a lot of great ideas here. If you were to say, if you want to take that path, above all, at least do this one thing, at least do this, what would you say that one thing to do would be?
Invest in your people, first and foremost. Get to know them, get to know who they are, and get to know their families, and invest in your people. You will never lose when you invest in your people first.
This is awesome. If people want to find you online, where's the best place or places to go?
Yeah, we're on all the social media channels. The company is at beaconmm.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I love to connect on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. You can find me at Adrienne.Wilkerson on LinkedIn. And we have a podcast, the Beacon Way podcast, on all of the different podcast channels. We'd love to connect with you there as well.
Thank you. This has been great. I appreciate you, Adrienne.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark.
And scene.
Perfect.
Nailed it.
That was awesome. Thank you. You do great with the interview questions. I love it.